price. It's just the route that you chose. You pick the hustle, go get it yourself, or you can go get it in school, but everything got a price. Some shit you can't charge to the game. Some people get money and start acting funny. They say it's the price of the fame, cause everything got a...
As I brace myself for another episode of succession planning, incest flaunting, and, well, walking, I find myself wondering, do they have these caskets ready to go, or is the funeral put on hold until one is made? If they're pre-built, how early is too early to have one ready without being in bad taste?
This entire sin is completely pointless. Seriously, why are any of these inconsequential questions flaws of the episode? Discount Jeremy is just padding the sin count and runtime. In the very first sin. Also, he implied that this show is boring yet again, which, as always, is incorrect, and my punishment of 1,000 sins still stands.
Also, while we're being disrespectful, did they really need the whole casket? I mean, she was just a skeletal ash pile at the end. Wouldn't have been easier to make a bust and save everyone the crafty time?
So the episode made a mistake for having these people uphold their traditions? That doesn't seem right.
None of the people out here on the rocks would hear this whispered funeral speech for Lena, so why risk the rocks at all? It's not like anyone's trying to take a perfectly cinematic picture.
Everything wrong with House of the Dragon, ladies and gentlemen. The show has great cinematography. Also, the guys out on the rocks aren't here for the speech. They're only household guards pledged to House Valerian. Essentially, they give the funeral protection without being in the funeral, or in other words, amongst the grieving crowd.
Joe tries to coax sadness from me, but forgets that it's conditioned me to feel nothing while watching because everyone dies a horrible death regardless of my investment.
I could be pedantic by pointing out how not everyone dies, or I could be nitpicky and point out how what he just said is a fault of his own for refusing to get invested in this incredible show. Either way, it's a sin, so take your pick.
Otto's back! Hip hip hoop! Wait a minute. He's the Hand again? We didn't even see Lionel die. Wait, his name was Lionel, right? Anyway, this badge is doing the narrative legwork of confirming that Lionel Strong is dead and that Viserys has decided he's able to trust Otto again. Why does this show persist in refusing to give me the I actually want to see?
The argument in this sin is that Discount Jeremy wanted to see Lord Strong die. However, this argument might just be one of the dumbest he's had in this series so far. In the previous episode, we saw that Lord Strong was trapped in his chambers while the fire consumed everything, and then we saw bodies being carried away in the aftermath. With all that in mind, what the hell did you want to see? Lord Strong's flesh melting? His blackened corpse? Wouldn't you just have sinned either of those things for being gross? There is zero rationale to this sin.
Me too, Aegon. Me too. I mean, Aemond. Aegon? Aemond. Wait, Aegon. No, Aemond. Definitely Aemond. No, it's Aegon. Aegon. 100%. Right?
That's Aegon, as you would know if you would simply pay attention. It's not the show's fault that you have the attention span of a toddler with ADHD. Also, Discount Jeremy incorrectly implies that this show is boring.
It took so long for this casket to drop into the sea. And while I know that we're meant to feel the importance of the ritual, we have other things to be interested in here. For example, Rhaenyra isn't queen yet. Let's get to that because we want to see her rule for a long, long time.
Did he just admit that this scene is meant to set the mood and then sin it anyway? That's dumb, not to mention the hypocrisy of him complaining about wanting to see more important things. Aren't you the same guy who complained about not seeing all the unnecessary stuff that happened during the time skip in the last video?
Okay, crew, we've got 5 minutes of staring followed by 20 minutes of some that's so dark it's essentially unwatchable. But before that, let's release the dragons. That'll buy us some goodwill and maybe keep people, guys? Why do the dragons even look miserable now?
Discount Jeremy incorrectly implies, you know what, you already know what this sin is for.
The next 8 minutes are filled with post-decade skip characters that we barely know anything about, exchanging uncomfortable glances. Pepper into this sad soup the awkward bubbling tension between children who are groomed to despise each other. The result is a viewer, like myself, forced to fill in the quiet spaces with my own version of what the glances and anger mean. It's exhausting. I hate it.
Oof, you completely missed the mark yet again. First, you lied about us not knowing these characters because we do know them, as a result of all the characterization and development you've been ignoring. Second, nobody who has actually been paying attention has any need to fill in for the glances and silences because we know what the characters are thinking and feeling. Again, as a result of paying attention. See how much you start to understand when you actually watch the show instead of, I don't know, whatever Aaron watched instead. Porn?
Nope, but you know who should be? This smirky asshole that everyone should be suspicious of at this point.
Dude, you already sinned the previous episode, meaning you already saw the scene where Lord Larys sent a bunch of prisoners to kill his family for him. Therefore, saying that everyone should suspect him of the murder is stupid. As for him being here instead of mourning his own family, that's actually very realistic. Everyone would simply write it off as Larys kissing the royal family's ass.
Hand turns knee, spool of green, spool of black, dragons, with flesh, weaving dragons of thread.
Sharing your poetry with arachnids.
Pointing things out on the screen.
Both my seat and high tide will be yours one day, Viserys.
They will not. I mean, I have no idea if that's true or not, but I'm willing to wager that all these people die horrible deaths and none but the rats live happily ever after.
And none of that is a sin, so now I'm just confused as to why you put that in the video.
Okay, we've given the show a lot of stick for putting us through conversations that are boring and don't do anything to progress the story, but they've somehow found something even more boring. Watching those same conversations from the perspective of someone who can't even hear what's being said.
Setting the mood, trusting your audience to not be dumber than a group of chimpanzees.
Go to bed, Emma.
An entire quarter of this episode has been spent at the funeral of a character we barely got to know and certainly didn't know long enough to truly care about. And yes, I know the funeral's a thematic backdrop for the actual meat of the scene, but when that meat is a patty of reminding us that the newly appointed Lord Strong is creepy, no one likes Rhaenyra, Aegon is a jerk, and the king is still decomposing, then I'm gonna want a refund for my meat, because it tastes like and disappointment.
Jesus Christ, this scene is not simply meant to remind us of a few things, it's informing us of the relationships and how time has altered them, which is actually a crucial aspect of the story. Also, he yet again implied the show is boring, so...
I will do what I must.
Oh, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, usually you're able to see what's on screen. But because this show is stupid, it decided to spill dark ink into a black void, retrieve a sample with a spoon made of stir in Satan's tears, smear the residue on a pane of glass, and use that as a filter over the cameras for basically the remainder of this episode. In order to help everyone out, I'll be narrating what happens next to speed us along.
Okay, so I'm going to save you from being subjected to the next 24 seconds of boring tangential bullshit. I'm adding 24 sins here, one for each second of your audience's time you wasted. Also, during that boring rant, he made a pop culture reference, so that's another sin. Also, I agree that a fair amount of this episode is a little too dark, that's the director's fault, but to call the show stupid as he did at the beginning of this sin is just way too hypocritical and ignorant to let go. I mean seriously, the guy who can't comprehend the simplest aspects of storytelling and refuses to watch any scenes with dialogue because he's an idiot who thinks that's boring is calling this amazing show stupid? That's worth 10 sins right there.
I gave up the idea of wearing a crown a generation ago. It is you, Lord Husband, who refuses to abandon this pursuit.
Rhaenys would be excellent at TVSins. And please, Corliss, give it up too. We've had this Rhaenys should have been queen debate over and over and over and over and over and over, and we get it. He thinks she should be queen. She is not queen. He does not like that she is not queen. She does not mind that she is not queen. Stop it.
And yet more lying. The purpose of this scene was not to reiterate the fact that Rhaenys was denied the throne. It was meant to set up the conflict over the inheritance of Driftmark. You would have known that if you had watched more than 5 seconds of the scene, but you probably got bored and watched something with no plot instead.
I know better than anyone that our marriage is a farce, but I at least make the effort to maintain appearances.
An effort wasted, it seems, when others would send his lover to fetch him out of the water and not you.
Wait, so if somebody you're not married to fetches you from the ocean, that means your marriage isn't valid? I'm not making this up, that's what he just said.
I'm no longer a child.
Wasn't there a scene where these two nearly f***ed in a brothel? I think the innocence of childhood wasn't really an issue at any time, so why is it coming up now?
If you had actually watched the whole scene for context, you would understand that Daemon abandoned Rhaenyra to spare her from his own depravity, essentially using her childhood as justification for his abandonment of her. Pay attention.
Also, they hook up in a brothel. They almost hook up at a wedding dinner. They hook up on the damn beach after his wife's funeral. I'm beginning to think that they're basing this relationship on a mutual love of exhibitionism, and strangely, that didn't even rank in the top 10 reasons you don't date your uncle article I just finished.
Okay, and why did you add us in here? I mean, he basically just said this really good plot point is actually bad because it's messed up. Are you really that much of a snowflake? If these characters suddenly started dancing all kumbaya and there was no longer any conflict in the show, would you like it more? Remember people, he calls himself a TV critic, but then says shit like this.
Are we finally to the part where we get to assume Rhaenyra is now pregnant, so we can finally care about Dany and Jon's eventual appearance in this world?
What the hell? What was any of that? He just randomly brings up pregnancy and then shoehorns in Daenerys and Jon. There's nothing critical, satirical, or funny about this sin, and it's really just confusing and dumb.
Look, I know we're giving this episode a hard time, but it bears repeating that I truly am stunned to find ourselves once again saying that we can't see shit in a Game of Thrones episode without jacking up the contrast on my TV and undoing all the effort that presumably went into this day for night filming choice.
Discount Jeremy double dips cliche.
Also, for those of you who may not know,
skip.
Just when I thought I couldn't sin more walking, the show dangles a beautiful new example of wasted wandering in the form of a dragon walking on air.
And the sin is what exactly? This scene with Aemond riding the dragon is phenomenal because it actively shows us his character seizing agency for himself, but he gave it a sin because it has a dragon flying? Why is that bad? What the hell?
If Fabio can't make it through a single roller coaster ride without taking a goose to the face, there's no way Aemond can make it through the birds here.
Yes there is. I mean, you're literally showing a scene in which Aemond misses all the birds, so you're essentially just yelling no at your screen and expecting it to be a valid sin. Also, that pop culture reference was somehow even more obscure than his normal references. The next 3 sins are simply Discount Jeremy complaining about how he refused to pay attention to the previous episode. Seriously, how is the show at fault for you being stupid? If you can't remember which of the children is which, that's on you because the show has made it abundantly clear.
Your cousins can find you a pig to ride. It would suit you.
Of course, the easy sin here is kids, but I just don't feel as if that covers my level of discomfort in being made to watch half a dozen children beating the Monday to Friday snot out of each other and one of them losing an eye. So let's send the fact that somebody thought of this scene, wrote it, got the kids to act it out, and then assumed millions of people would enjoy it.
And guess what? Their assumption was 100% correct. So now you just look like an ignorant asshole because again, you're sinning an amazing show for having an amazing plot point simply because it's messed up.
How could you allow such a thing to happen?
I really hope he's asking this question into a mirror. Like, how are there no adults watching the kids, even though they all stand to inherit massive responsibilities and lands and crowns and How have they all snuck out to kill each other without one person noticing? Why are guards so hard to find during the stabbing parts of the episodes?
They snuck past the guards, or commanded the guards not to follow them. Either way, it's not a sin.
Over an insult. My son has lost an eye.
Well, you know the old saying, an eye for an eye, know who your real daddy is.
Unfunny joke is unfunny.
Where is Seleno?
Entertaining his young squires. Adventure.
Okay, we're about to get into a big hoo-ha and kerfuffle because accusing the princess's kids of being bastards is a treasonable offense, but Alicent can get away with calling out Prince Laenor's sexuality and fidelity as if it's nothing more than a heavy night at the tavern?
Yes.
That is insufficient.
My thoughts about this entire prequel make it into, I think you get the message by now, I am not having a good time.
And he now straight up admits that he's a dumbass. If you're not having a good time while watching this incredible show, that's your own fault, buddy. Here's another 1,000 sins.
Rather than disarm Alicent, everyone stops to see if her slashing resulted in a visible wound. Rather than stop the bleeding, everyone stops to look at Alicent to see if her slashing resulted in remorse.
Wait, they didn't disarm her? That actually is a legitimate Oh, wait, it's because she dropped the knife. So, Aaron, tell me how you expect these people to disarm an unarmed person? Also, as for the part about stopping the bleeding, they literally disband seconds after this, so this sin is very deceiving and stupid.
What that rogue Aemond has done in winning Vhagar to our side, it's worth 1,000 times the price he paid.
1,000 eyes? I know he's being hyperbolic, but you try getting your eye removed 1,000 times before you go throwing around false equivalencies like that.
Admits that he's being hyperbolic, sins it anyway.
My goodness, for the love of all that is holy, use a smaller needle.
What do you think this is, Grey's Anatomy? This show is set in a medieval society. They probably don't have any smaller needles.
So actually, here's an idea. Stop showing us people getting stitches. I have an imagination, and as I'm already using it to think of all the things I'd rather be watching right now, I may as well use some of that bandwidth to imagine the stitches myself.
Wait, did he just say he has an imagination? Yeah, okay dude, sure you do.
Also, do you think that the writers have a certain quota for their series? Like, we need to see the body endure brutality at least 14 times each episode, or on average 1,921 times each season. Bonus points for needles! And if they do, why do they think that keeps people interested?
What keeps people interested is the political maneuvering and remarkable characters. Regardless, why is this a sin? Are you trying to say that showing brutality is always bad? What the hell? So you think this show should just be a bunch of people saying, yes, I agree, we all get along, we all love each other, no need to fight, the end.
Yeah, but I'm sure even in these primitive times, there's some ointments that can... Oh, she's being metaphorical, isn't she? Carry on.
And what was the point of this sin? Seeing as it wasn't critical, I can only assume it was meant to be funny, but it also wasn't funny, so now I'm just confused.
These are dangerous times.
You don't say. Must be a day that ends in Y. God, why isn't this episode over yet?
Hopefully for the last time, Discount Jeremy incorrectly implies that this show is bad.
We could not marry unless Leonor were dead.
I know.
Let's talk about the villain's plan. And for clarity on this occasion, the villains we're talking about are Damon and Rhaenyra. They're going to trick everyone into thinking that Laenor was killed by his lover in a sword fight in the heart of Driftmark, but actually send him and said lover off to a whole new world so that Rhaenyra is free to immediately marry Damon. Look, even if this plan goes off without a hitch, which of course it does because they pull an Ocean's 11 and montage it as it's being described to us, that still leaves Laenor out in the world capable of exposing them the second he realizes life as a commoner ain't all it's cracked up to be.
Didn't you mention in your last video that Laenor genuinely cares about Rhaenyra? With that in mind, why do you think he'd be willing to expose her? Also, why is it a sin that the plan goes off without a hitch? I mean, you constantly sin people for making bad plans, but the second someone makes a good plan that works, you sin that too? That makes no sense.
Also, putting aside the fact that they're robbing Corlys and Rhaenys of their last child, Rhaenyra and Daemon both acknowledge that remarrying so quickly will immediately attract all of the murdery suspicions to be cast on Rhaenyra. But I suppose they just think, hey, it. If we're lucky, we're about to hit another 6-year time jump, so we won't have to deal with any of these pesky immediate consequences.
Except they do deal with the consequences. We see the suspicion that Rhaenys has towards them in the very next episode. The fact that Rhaenyra and Daemon are never convicted of the murder is A, because there's no evidence they were involved, and B, they're part of the royal family.
Introducing a brand new character in the last 10 seconds of your episode.
I get that this was meant as a joke, but the issue is that it wasn't even close to being funny.
Marguerite's lawyer tomorrow. She left us something in her will.
Holy crap! Oh, you sweet old broad, I love you. Hey! Oh my God, she's dead.